All right, let's get some insight from former U.S. General Mark Kimmitt. He joins us now from Washington. General, always good to see you. There are some U.S. officials who don't see a one man making a tide-turning difference in Moscow's prospects. Where do you stand?
Well, I would look at history. It is clear that in many cases, countries lose their first couple of battles and they find a general who has been proven to be successful. American history has that many times. President Lincoln found his Grant, and I think President Putin has now found his Grant. This guy is a tough general, and nobody should have any doubts about it. But it's not just a good general, but they've actually thought of a good strategy here. Instead of trying to attack on multiple fronts in the north, south, east, and partially in the west, they are now focusing their attacks in the east alone. That shortens the supply lines, makes command and control easier. A single commander makes things easier to manage. And so candidly, I think the combination of their new strategy and candidly, a brutal new commander means that we ought to be looking at this very, very seriously.
You call him brutal. I mean, other descriptions of the general is that he's old school, as well as a blood and soil nationalist. Yes, we know, and you mentioned that Russian forces have shifted their attention to the country's east, but is he likely to sort of follow a particular tactic here when the country sort of shifts its military tactics?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There was a great study done near the end of major combat operations in Syria, which talked about what were the Russian lessons learned in Syria. Part of that study reflected on Gerasimov, who is now the chief of the general staff, who is reputed to be the author of the first phase of this operation. He believed in Syria that this had more to do with surprise against the enemy, and I think that's indicative when you take a look at that first surprise assault they did coming down from Belarus. But as you say, I think the lessons that Dvorknikov took away from the fight in Syria was, let's do it the old way, the old school: mass, artillery, missiles, brutality, and an unforgiving offensive, as we saw so often in World War II. So the short answer is yes. I think it's going to be a tight, narrow fight where significant concentrations of firepower and armored vehicles are going to be used. I think they're going to push west from the Donbass, and that will simply be the first phase of this next phase of the overall operation.
General Kimmitt, you said that countries or sides could lose their first couple battles in the war. You gave specific examples, but in every instance there has been sort of a top commander. Are you surprised that up until now there hasn't been sort of an overall commander for the Russians in their operation in Ukraine?
I have been. I would have expected somebody to come in very early after the failed attempt to do the blitzkrieg towards Kyiv, and even in that second phase where they tried to attack on multiple fronts. In many ways, I think it had to do with the fact that the Russians overestimated their own capabilities and underestimated the capabilities of the Ukrainians. By attacking at 5 or 6 different axes, they thought they could disrupt the command and control of the Ukrainians. Quite candidly, the reverse happened. There is a very tough general running the Ukrainian forces. Unfortunately, now we have a very tough general running the Russian forces.
All right, General Mark Kimmitt, thank you very much for joining us on the NewsHour. Always appreciate the analysis. Thank you.